Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the Spurs Chat podcast. I've got returning guest Alex Milne back with us, of course, national content editor at the Daily Express, to talk about everything Tottenham Hotspur and, of course, the January transfer window. Alex, welcome back to the channel. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Chris. Nice to see you again. I was actually trying to remember back this morning about the last time I was on, and I think it was just after we beat Aston Villa 4-0 last season. It was a very positive show. We played some lovely football. Son scored a hat-trick, and it was a really exciting time. So, as we can see, things can change very quickly with Tottenham, and unfortunately, I don't think today's show is going to be quite as happy as that one was.
Alex, first of all, let's talk about how you're feeling, because I should have mentioned, actually, as well as you working at the Daily Express, of course, you are a Spurs fan. How are you feeling as a fan right now? What have you made of the season so far?
Where to start? I just feel this. It's almost back to the days of kind of the mid 2000s, sort of early ones, where I just don't know where we go from here. I feel like we've tried everything. We've tried different types of managers. We've made signings, and just it's not working again. It's getting to that horrible feeling where there's a clear disconnect now between Conte and the club. The players don't seem to be buying into it. The fans aren't buying into it. You know, you go into the stadium and there's just that lack of atmosphere, lack of excitement. I mean, if we look at the last two league games, 2-0, both 2-0 losses, and so little to shout about, so few chances, so little excitement. And we're talking about here a club that charge one of the highest ticket prices in the world. And it's very worrying. It's extremely worrying. I know that football can change very quickly. We saw it with the Palace game where I think everyone was kind of doom and gloom. And then we ended up putting in one of our best halves of the season and winning 4-0. But where do we go from here when we got City coming up twice? The season could quite feasibly be over for us within a few weeks or a month or so. So it's extremely concerning. And I think you'd be hard-pressed at the moment to find any Spurs fan that has got much positive to say, because it's been that bleak recently.
Alex, what do you make of Antonio Conte's style of football? Are you still 100% behind him?
I think the thing is that when Conte first came in, we all, I think, agreed that he might not be the perfect fit for us, that we weren't going to see the swashbuckling, attacking football that we saw under, for example, Mauricio Pochettino. But I think all Spurs fans have been so starved of success recently that we thought, well, look, if we can put that to one side, if he wins us anything, a Carabao Cup, an FA Cup, another good run in the Champions League, even the Europa League, we've put that to one side and accept it because we know he's a winner, much like Mourinho. And we thought, you know, we just need any kind of silverware, no matter how we play. And the difference is, again, that when he first came, we saw that passion on the touchline. He G'd up the crowd. He hugged his players enthusiastically. They felt like there's something really special building. Whereas now we've got the negative football, we've got the directionless football, but we don't even have results. So there's kind of very little that there is to back up Conte at the moment. He's one of the highest paid managers in the world. Yes, we know there's squad issues. Yes, we know that we don't have the players who can match City. I hate to say Arsenal, even Newcastle at the moment, I'd argue, have got almost a better squad than us. But he should be doing more. He's got to be doing more. He's one of the most recognisable, most charismatic managers in world football on his day. And at the moment, even he looks lost, and he looks like he's already kind of thinking about his next move. So sure, there's issues around the whole club. There's issues. I think everyone has to take a share of the blame, but Antonio Conte certainly got to take a big portion of it.
Alex, what do you make of Antonio Conte's press conference, particularly the last one, calling out the board and the sporting director, saying that they're not here talking about the club's vision?
I've got mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, I think he is pretty spot on. I mean, where is Daniel Levy? How often do we hear from him? I know that it's an issue in not just at Spurs, but it can be an issue in many football clubs when owners kind of hide in the shadows and don't speak forward. But at the end of the day, he is the most powerful man at Tottenham Hotspur. And we hear from him probably, once or twice a year, maybe at the end of the season, or well, when we inevitably sack a manager, we hear from him. Other than that, no one seems to know what Daniel Levy is doing. I mean, numerous journalists have talked in the past about the difficulties of getting an interview with him, of communicating with him. We know that, there's been many reports that he's slightly socially awkward and doesn't communicate. It's not his forte. But at the moment, as I've said, no one seems to know what the direction is, what the plan is, whether we are, meant to be backing this world-class manager, or whether in the summer we're going down a whole different way, ripping it all up and starting again. And from a player's perspective, looking in as well, if you're thinking of joining us in January, you'd be thinking, well, am I going to play under Antonio Conte, or am I going to play under him for a few months? I'm in a new manager. What is the aim of the club? Are we wanting to be a regular top 4 club? Are we just hoping to, tread water, maybe go on a few cup runs? There's just no sort of long-term planning. So from that aspect, I can understand Conte's comments. On the other hand, it seems slightly convenient that he's only bringing them up now when he's under a bit of pressure. I mean, he's not said this before, and it feels like it's, again, an example of him trying to shift the blame, get the attention off him. We've seen him having a pop at the chairman, the medical staff, the players, but I can't remember one example where he said, I got this wrong. I should have changed things quicker. I should have, put someone else in the starting lineup. So, it's a conference that very much sums up the disconnect of the club at the moment. You wouldn't get many managers having a pop at the chairman and getting away with it. But he seems to be doing it. And again, we just wonder where is Levy, when would he act, and what's going to happen? Because as far as I can tell, no one really knows.
I was going to say that actually, because, certainly in the last couple of press conferences, surely he's come out and the board can't be happy with what he said. How long do you think he's going to be at Spurs, Conte?
I think a lot depends on the next few weeks. I mean, as I've mentioned, we've got City on Thursday. It's really got to a bad stage where you've even got Spurs fans who don't want us to win that game because of course, the Arsenal thing. But I mean, we're in January. We're not even we're just about halfway through the season. And it's almost at the point where Spurs fans are writing off the season saying, well, we'd rather throw a game effectively to stop our rivals winning something. But how bad is that? But we've got so little chance of aiming for anything ourselves that we'd rather do that. So, I mean, look, a heavy defeat in that game. And then I think it's Fulham after that. That's not an easy game. They're doing really well at the moment. They're pretty much everything, but we're not. They've got a clear system, exciting football, riding high off a wave of positivity around the stadium. So that's not going to be easy. And then City again, I think there's Preston in between that as well. But feasibly, if there's not a win out of those 3 games coming up, it wouldn't surprise me if there's no option for Levy to pull the trigger. On the other hand, we could scrape a draw here and there, maybe beat Fulham, and it'll just continue on till the end of the season. But there has to, at some point, be a plan in mind. And I think this is the issue with Conte's short-term contracts, that sure, it suits him and it maybe suits the club in a certain aspect that we can get rid of him quickly and get someone else in. But we're left where we might just have a few months of complete and utter uncertainty where we've essentially written off another season and we've got no idea of what's going on going forward. So, I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know. If I was to hazard a guess, I'd say we will stumble towards the end of the season and he'll leave it then, maybe finishing 6th, 7th, even 8th. But it's a bleak picture, let's put it like that.
With that said, Alex, and if Conte did plan to leave on the 30th of June after his contract expires, in your opinion, what do Spurs need to do in this January transfer window?
I mean, we all know that January is a difficult time to spend. Realistically, we're probably not going to get in the kind of caliber of player that's going to take us to the next level. But we need to fill the holes that we've got in the squad. I mean, wing back is the obvious one. We know that, frankly, our wing backs aren't good enough. Jed Spence, we don't know how good he is. We just don't have a clue. We've seen what he can do at championship level, but for whatever reason, which could be a whole nother show on its own, Conte doesn't seem to fancy him. So, yeah, I mean, look, we're being linked with this Pedro Porro. I can't pretend I'm a complete expert in the player, but from what I've seen, he certainly is an improvement on what we've got. He looks comfortable with the ball at his feet. He can take a man on. He can whip a cross in, which is the kind of player we've been crying out for years and years. So I'd be happy if that gets done. From what I understand, negotiations are still ongoing. Sporting are holding out for our 45 million release clause, which it looks like we might pay. Whether that's all up front or in installments seems to be the main sticking point. But I wouldn't be surprised if that deal does get done, which would be positive. Again, it might be a case of, being late in the window rather than in the coming days, but hopefully that'll get sorted. There's also talk about Leandro Trossard. I mean, I'm less kind of optimistic and also less sure that he's what we're looking for. Good player, of course. He scored 7 goals so far this season. We've seen that he can turn it on, especially against big teams. But we're going to be battling, it looks like, Arsenal and Chelsea for him, which is one issue. And another one is his kind of attitude. We've seen it. Well, my colleague Ryan Taylor kind of broke the news that he'd stormed off and he jumped on the Eurostar after falling out with the manager. It's not a sign of a player that maybe we want in our dressing room. And it's just one of those, again, where is he really going to take us to the next level? Is he a player that we've gone out, scouted and thought, yeah, that's who we really want? Or is it a case of, oh, he's on the market, he's going to be relatively cheap, he'll do a job for a bit maybe, and let's hope that he exceeds expectations. I think 25 million's around the number that's being banded around for him, which is, a very Levy signing. It's a very reasonable amount of money, but I can't see how he's going to be really a massive improvement on what we've got in that position. And aside from that, I really can't see where another transfer is coming from. We know that the goalkeeping situation is one we need to address, but it seems like more of a summer move than anything else. I personally would love David Raya from Brentford. I think he's brilliant, but again, there's issues of would he want to come to us specifically? Brentford are on a good roll. Would there be other clubs in for him? United need a new keeper probably. They wouldn't be surprised if they go in for him, or a Spanish team, something like that. So, yeah, I mean, this January, it's going to be about, as it always is for Spurs, finding the players that are realistic, putting in, low ball offers and hoping that one of them comes good. But I can't see anything that's going to really excite or outstand the fans, really.
Alex, dare I ask the question? The last time I was excited about a signing where I thought, wow, was Jurgen Klinsmann back in 1994. It was a real wow signing. And I, as a Spurs fan, want to see top quality players coming into the football club as they do all of the other top 6 sides in the Premier League. They're all doing business in this January transfer window. Why do you think that Spurs don't seem to get these deals done in bringing in world-class players? Because the reason I ask that, Antonio Conte, if you're bringing in a world-class manager like Antonio Conte, you know that he's going to want the best. You know that he is going to want to build a winning team. He is a born winner. He's won trophies everywhere he's gone. Surely this time Spurs need to change the way that they do things and back this manager. I'm personally, for me personally, I'm hoping that he stays beyond the summer. I'm hoping that, he is the guy to bring us success that we haven't had in so long. But when you look back at the managers, Pochettino, he didn't spend a penny in 518 days. He was then sacked after shortly after the Champions League final. Jose Mourinho sacked 6 days before a cup final. Nuno Espirito Santo, it took him 72 days to appoint him. Of course, it didn't work out. So when you bring in Antonio Conte, surely it has to work. This time it has to be different.
The thing is, though, Chris, you say that, but I got the sense in the summer that most Spurs fans were really happy with our business, and myself included. I think we maybe bigged up the summer much more than it actually was. I mean, when you look at it now, can you really say any one of those signings have been a massive success? You could say Richarlison, okay, he's had injury issues. He has shown signs of quality, but the jury is very much out, especially when you consider his price fee. Perisic has done okay without being spectacular. I probably expected a bit more from him, but he's not been, disaster. And then when you look at everyone else, I mean, Bissouma has been an absolute woeful. I cannot understand what's gone wrong with him when you consider how good he was at Brighton, how much was expected of him. I just haven't seen any real even signs of promise from him. Jed Spence, we know, has been a disaster as well. So, I mean, there was money spent. It wasn't as much as other clubs. But I just think it all comes down to we're not identifying the exact players we want. We're looking at who's available, putting in bids, and then just kind of getting what's on the market. Whereas, I mean, I'm not saying the Spurs should be more like Brighton and Brentford, but if you look at their business models, they are so much more advanced in terms of their scouting, of their kind of signing players out of nowhere, upcoming players who maybe have gone under the radar, that they then mould into brilliant players that are Premier League proven, that they can then sell on for bigger fees. But I just don't get why we can't do that. We've got all the infrastructure in place. We've got the best stadium, well, arguably the best stadium in the world, amazing training facilities. We've got the money there. Why can't we, just step back a minute and say, right, where's it going wrong? Why have we signed so many dud players? Why? I mean, Kulusevski, Bentancur, great. I kind of feel like they were flukes as well, in the sense that they have ended up all right. But so many players we bring in just do not do the business, and it can't be a coincidence. So whether it's addressing it earlier or helping players settle in better, I don't know what it is, but something clearly has got to change. And yeah, as I said, I think the main issue at the moment is going to be attracting players to the club of that caliber, because they're going to look elsewhere and see, well, why would I go Spurs above Newcastle, Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, all of them kind of looking more promising future than we have at the moment.
Alex, how do you think that the club can win some of the fans back and get them on board and make things different in the next couple of weeks? What do Spurs need to do? Is it the case of we need to go out, spend big, show real ambition, show Conte that we're backing him, that we want him to be here next season? Because, of course, Conte himself keeps coming out and saying he's happy at Tottenham.
I mean, as I said before, I think communication is just crucial at this point, because the fans don't know if Conte is going to be here or not. And it's so hard to get behind the team and to get behind Conte himself when you could think, well, he's not invested. He's kind of just biding his time, picking up a big paycheck until he finds a better offer in the summer. I know the supporters board have written to the club with questions about the long-term vision.
Yeah.
As far as I know, there's not been a response from that yet. So I'll be intrigued to see if and when those answers are released. But it's just identifying what we want to be in a club. Whether, imagine in a few weeks, the results do improve, Conte pens a long deal, Levy says, right, we're backing our man, and that's it. I just think even if results don't immediately pick up, there will still be more of a getting behind, knowing that he's there for the long term. Whereas at the moment, we don't know what team we are. We don't know what team we're supporting at the moment. If he does go, I just hope that we identify a manager who is going to buy into the vision and buy into what we want. So whether that's a young new manager who's kind of working his way up, a kind of Pochettino mold, who Levy's going to say, right, we don't have all the money in the world, but here's a few players, go and do your best with them, and we get that kind of positive energy. Because what we don't need anymore, and what we can't, I don't think any Spurs fan can bear at the moment, is just the constant, as journalists, we have to ask Conte the question, are you going to be here or not? But it's just dominating everything. It's every press conference. It's always, he, won't he? And it's got to be a distraction for the players. So I think if he is going to go, I'm personally fine with that. Thank you very much for your work and goodbye. But a decision's got to be made before the summer, because otherwise I think it's just going to descend into a circus.
Alex, what do you make of a number of fans wanting Antonio Conte gone? Personally, I'm a big fan of him. I think if he is backed in the right way, he will bring success to this football club. But there are a number of fans at the moment don't like the style of football and don't like him. What do you say to them?
I'd say to them, I can understand it. I can totally understand it. It's not been good enough. The games are turgid. The first half issue is absolutely bizarre, and I don't understand how it hasn't been addressed yet. How many times can the players and the manager come out and say, we're working on improving our first half performances, but how are we not seeing any signs of improvement in that aspect? I mean, fans, regular match-going fans, yourself included, must be wondering, well, we might as well turn it for the second half, because there's so many 45-minute periods just wasted watching turgid, dire football. So I can understand people who want Conte out. My only issue is that, as we know, for the last 20 years, it's not about the manager. It's not Conte's fault that we have won one trophy in 20 years. It's not Conte's fault that he's maybe not got exactly the signings he wanted. It's not Conte's fault that there's this disconnect between the board and the fans at the moment. It's been unfortunate that it's come during his reign, but it feels like this is just the straw that broke the camel's back. Enough is enough. We've tried everything. We've tried every style of manager, and it all comes back down to the owners at the end of the day, who have not provided the kind of success that we wanted. So, yeah, I'd say to most fans, look, obviously sacking Conte might be what you want, but who are we going to get in right now, right at this moment, that's going to improve things straight away? And I genuinely cannot think of anyone on the market or anyone who we'd be able to tempt away from their current club who would see an immediate impact. So, unfortunately, I think we're in for a difficult rest of the season. And and then we're just going to have to hope either Conte's back or we get a new man in who's going to turn things around.
What do you think the best Antonio Conte can hope for this season, Alex? Do you think that Spurs could finish in the top 4, or do you think that it would be worth putting all our eggs in the basket of trying to go for something like the FA Cup that we haven't won for so long?
I mean, an FA Cup triumph would certainly be, I think, for many fans, that it'd be the best thing we've achieved for years. Obviously we've had top 4 on a number of occasions, but the club's got such a special relationship with the FA Cup. We haven't won it for such an embarrassingly long amount of time, considering our history. But in terms of top 4, I mean, even during the World Cup, I was still confident. I thought that we'd turn it on a bit afterwards, that we'd come back a bit renewed and with new ideas and with the players who Conte had worked with over the break to come back and be improved players. But it hasn't happened, and it's just looking more and more unlikely. I just can't see what team that are currently in the top 4 we're gonna overtake at this point in time. Arsenal are long gone, City are long gone, Newcastle I can't see faltering at any point. Manchester United are looking better and better each week. So, as much as I usually try and be optimistic, and I usually try and look on the positive side, I almost think top 4 is gone. So yeah, look, if we can progress in the FA Cup, that would at least be something positive about the season. It does look like the path's clearing slightly. A lot of Premier League teams have already gone out, so that's something positive. Obviously, Preston should be winnable. If we lose that, then it really would be crisis. There's still the Champions League. I mean, I almost keep forgetting, but we still got a huge Champions League last 16 against AC Milan, who I think on paper we should be able to compete with. I'd say it's a pretty 50-50 game. So we can improve our form before that and then get to the last 8. Then as we've seen in the Champions League before, anything can happen. So in my opinion, a successful rest of the season would be to at least secure 5th and go deep in both those competitions. But I'm sorry, I can't see top 4 now. I just cannot see where we're gonna string together a consistent run of winning games on a row where other teams are going to fall away.
Alex, you mentioned earlier, a couple of weeks ago, that the Trust wrote a letter to the club asking for answers about the club direction and their ambitions. The club are going to respond in February with a statement from Fabio Paratici. What do you think that is going to say?
I think it's going to be the same as usual. A lot of PR waffle, really. What can they say apart from the fact that they want the club to go forward? They're trying to improve the situation. I'm sure they'll address specific issues, maybe a bit more. But I can't see it being a clear answer that Spurs fans are going to be satisfied with. It'll be very watered down. It'll be very, checked by numerous eyes before it goes published. So who knows? It's not going to be anything that everyone's going to go, oh, okay, that's fine then. All our questions are going to be answered. I'm sure there's going to be a bit more back and forth between the Trust and between the club. But there's just such a disconnect. I mean, again, I hate to point out the example. If you look at Arsenal right now, that everyone is buying into it. The fans, the manager, the players, the board, they all seem to be working as one cohesive unit and riding this wave, having weathered tough times. And at Spurs at the moment, it just feels like there's all sorts of separate entities. There's fans who want Conte in, there's fans who want Conte out, there's fans who want ENIC in, there's fans who want ENIC out. There's players who probably want to be there, some players who don't want to be there. So it's just night and day between those two clubs at the moment, which is incredible, really, when you consider what happened last season and how that was supposed to be the time for us to push on, having secured Champions League football. And I just can't quite understand how it's gone to this. It's very, very typical of Spurs.
You're absolutely right, Alex. A lot of people want the manager in. A lot of people want him out. Similar with the board. A lot of people are slating the players, stating that the players aren't good enough. We're now talking about a new manager. Reports have come out today stating that Thomas Tuchel would be open to managing Spurs if Antonio Conte left. I tell you what, that wouldn't surprise me one bit. Or Pochettino could even return. Can you believe at this stage of the season we are already talking about a possible new manager?
Honestly, no.
I just thought, I think last time I was on the show, I was just raving about Conte. I thought we'd hit the jackpot. I thought this was finally the brave new dawn that we needed. And yeah, there have been periods. There are periods towards last season. I think, as I spoke about that Villa 4-0 game, I remember being at I think it was a game before in Newcastle. We won 5-1 at home. I was at that game, and there was just such a buzz and such a sense of promise. You know, the defence had been shored up. We looked like we were doing well going forward. Kane and Son were on fire that day, and it just seemed like we were ready to push on and you know, go back to the very peak of the Pochettino days where we were challenging for titles and having Champions League runs. And then this season's just been a complete and utter, let's be honest, it's been a disaster so far. Despite many Spurs fans have discussed, but how many matches can you remember that you sat through 90 minutes and been thought that's just an all-round brilliant performance? You know, Southampton first day of the season, that 4-1 win. As I said, the second half against Palace. I'm really struggling with any more, really. Maybe Leicester 6-2, although that had a few, you know, defensive problems. So, no, I can't believe I'm talking about the manager. And I just can't think that anything's going to change. I mean, Tuchel, come on. Great manager, but we've tried this. We've tried the ex-Chelsea manager who's, you know...
Many times.
Many times. When's it ever worked? It hasn't. I know some people are arguing it's different because Tuchel was a Spurs fan as a kid, but it's not the sort of manager we need. It's not worked. We need someone who's a younger, driven, has better ideas, you know, who's coming through and who's fresh, not another kind of, not washed up, that's too harsh, but not another old school manager who's going to do pretty much the same as Conte, who's going to be against the board, who's going to cause friction in the dressing room. I think if it is Tuchel, which I don't think it will be for record, but if it is, I think that will just split the fan base even more, and it will just be another Conte situation. It's going to be chaos.
Alex, do you think Pochettino is being lined up to be the next Spurs manager? I've got to ask that question.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and I think he might be. You know, I really think he might be. The fact that it's all gone a bit quiet on the front with him, the fact that the board are being so secretive, so quiet behind the scenes, the fact that Conte looks almost resigned to the fact that his body language to me suggests that he's not going to be here for the long run. Yeah, let's just say I would not be shocked at all. And I think if Levy is thinking of a way to appease fans, that is kind of a way to do it. We know what a popular figure he was. We know how much we love Pochettino. A large section of a fan base would be delighted to see him back, despite obviously still having reservations about the board and stuff. But it's essentially Pochettino coming back to the same role with an even weaker squad than when he left. And it all harks back to that painful rebuild he talked about when it hasn't happened. So
yeah,
I think I would admire Poch massively for coming back. It would show how much adoration he's got for the club, how much he loves us, how he clearly didn't want to go in the first place. But I just don't think it would work out. I really don't. It would just be the same issues as before. And in a way, it would just show a complete lack of ambition to go back to something we had before rather than trying something different. So look, the romantic part of me would say, yes, it would be a wonderful thing. But I mean, imagine the atmosphere in the stadium the first time he took over again. It would be incredible. But I just think it would fade pretty quickly unless he was backed, which I don't think he would be.
Alex, what players do you expect to go out from Spurs in this January transfer window? Because a couple of weeks ago, I think all of us would have probably said Sarr and Brian Hill would have gone out on loan, but it looks unlikely for them to now. You mentioned Jed Spence earlier. Tanganga's probably the only one that I could think that could possibly go out in this window. Any other players, or are you hearing anything about Jed Spence? Do you think he will go out on loan?
Yeah, funnily enough, actually, I was going to say the only two I can think of are Tanganga and Spence. Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing a few things about Spence. The first being that, as far as I can tell, there isn't any sort of attitude issue or anything like that. I think towards the start of his Spurs career, he was very accepting of the fact that he wouldn't break into the team straight away. He knew that he needed to work with Conte and kind of get up to speed with the team. So any reports that he was immediately kind of, a disruptive influence or moaning about not being in the starting lineup,
as far as I understand, were completely unfounded. Then, of course, we have a World Cup break, which gave Conte the chance to work with him a bit more. And I think both fans and everyone really hoped that he might be gradually introduced into the team in January. And for one reason or another, it's not happened. I mean, I find it baffling, especially when you look at games like against Portsmouth in the FA Cup. Why he couldn't have been given more of a role in that game is just baffling to me. So it seems clear that for whatever reason, Conte doesn't trust him. And yeah, it's looking like it'll be a loan. I really hope it's a loan to a Premier League team rather than a Championship one. We know he can cut it in the Championship. We know was one of the best players for Nottingham Forest last season. We don't need any more evidence of that. So if he is to go, let's talk about maybe Southampton. I think that would be good for him. That would be a good test to see where he's at. And Spurs fans themselves would be interested to see him on a weekly basis and see what he can bring to a lower Premier League team. So fingers crossed that gets sorted. And then who knows, if it is a new man in the summer, maybe he can come back and make better use of Spence, which would be a big bonus. And yeah, Tanganga, I just think, he's popular obviously among the fan base. He's a local lad. When he first broke through, it looked like he was the next, the real deal at the back, but it's just not really worked out for him. I think most fans probably would be of the agreement that he's just not quite at the level we need him to be at the moment. So that could be another loan, but it also wouldn't surprise me to see him leave permanently. I just can't see a world where he's going to make it at Spurs. And it's pretty telling that, I mean, we've seen all sorts of issues with our back three, and he's even then just been used kind of intermittently, hasn't he? And he's still not been trusted despite the struggles of Dyer, Longley, etc. But apart from those two, we can't let anyone else go until we've brought anyone else in. I mean, as you mentioned, Brian Hill, he has looked better in recent weeks, but probably the plan would have been to loan him out again. But with Richarlison's injury, Kulusevski seems to get injured on a regular basis. We can't afford not to have him, I think. The same with Sarr, who obviously was probably the only bright spark in that Arsenal defeat, and who's looked really promising over the last few weeks. So in the same way, I don't see any major incomings. I can't see any outgoings other than those two.
I was going to ask Alex, apart from Pedro Porro and Leandro Trossard, any other players that you think may join Spurs in the next 2 weeks?
I'm struggling. I really am. Unless, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that if we really have decided that the Lloris situation has become a crisis whereby we can't make it to the end of the season with him, maybe they'll be looking for another goalkeeper. But as I said before, I'm pretty confident that'll be more of a summer project than right now. There's just so many areas of our team, so many that we need to fill in. I mean, why we didn't go in for more of a creative midfielder in the summer, I'll never know, especially when, especially when Eriksen was being linked and it seemed like he would have preferred us over United, but we didn't really push for him. We're now, I think, being made to look really stupid in that front because he's been brilliant for United, one of their best signings. I still think we need another forward, another centre-back, another wing-back. Are we going to get them? I don't think so. I think, as I said earlier, at a push, maybe Porro, maybe Trossard. I think other than those two, or a similar profile player, I can't see it. Unless there's some mad last-minute deals on offer or a loan move that suits all parties. I don't think so. And, as I said before, as a player, who could blame you for not fancying it at the moment? It's such a turbulent time at Spurs that why would you fancy kind of risking your career to join the circus that we are at the moment?
Would you be surprised if we didn't sign a right wing back in the next 2 weeks? Because when you said about how well we've done in the summer window, I completely agree with you. I thought we started off very, very well, which of course we always leave signings to the last minute. So we started the window well. All of the clubs around us then signed players. So our window didn't look as good as we thought it was. At the end of the window, I thought that we needed a couple more players. Jed Spence, of course, we didn't know whether he was going to come straight into the first team, which of course he hasn't. The right wing back situation, Alex, is just, it's so obvious. And I just cannot believe that we are, 2 weeks gone of the January window and we haven't got this deal done. If it's just a matter of a few £1 million to get the Pedro Porro deal done.
Well, it should come as a surprise to any of us, really. We know that the club operate in that way. They have done for years and years and years. But I mean, it's getting to the point now where, for example, with Emerson Royale, it's almost beyond a joke. And I feel for him because I think he's trying his best. It's not through a lack of effort. It's not that he's, just thrown in the towel or anything, but it's almost like in the stadium now, you can sense it when he gets the ball. Everyone's waiting for him to make a mistake, to jump on him, to moan, to dent his confidence even further. And I blame Conte for that. He's the one throwing him in there when he's not up to the level. And it's just going to be a farce if we're playing him for the rest of the season, and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. I thought at first maybe he's looked rusty, maybe he'll improve. It's just not going to happen for him. And that's just another criticism of Conte. It's just for stubbornness. Why is he keeping playing him there? When everyone else in the world, anyone with a pair of eyes can see that. I'd even play Doherty here. I mean, I prefer Doherty to Spence to Royale for sure. So I'd like to think we'll get a right wing back in, even if it's not Porro, if it's someone else, even if it's a temporary solution until the end of the season. I think every Spurs fan would need that to feel any kind of optimism. But this system of Conte's is not going to work and never will work unless we get in a pacey right wing back and left wing back who he trusts. And the club must know that. They have to know that. I'm sure they've been told that by Conte. So it's down to them. It's down to them now. Hopefully the Porro deal can get tied up sooner rather than later, but it would not surprise me at all if it drags on. We don't agree terms and miss out on him. It's nothing surprises me anymore on that front.
Yeah. Alex, lastly, of course, Thursday evening we take on the champions Manchester City. It doesn't get any easier, does it? And then, of course, followed by Fulham away. Out of these two games, how do you see, how many points do you think Spurs will pick up out of 6?
It's a very good question. I mean, the City game is just such a strange one. As I touched on earlier, just for that fact of fans almost not wanting us to win. I mean, look, our record against City is strangely very good. We've been a bogey team for them over the past. They're not in great form, but then again, you just feel like they could easily turn it on one day and beat us 4 or 5-0. I think that a draw wouldn't shock me. Just because, again, it would be a very Spurs thing to do to not get the win, but also help Arsenal out in that sense. Fulham away, honestly, I don't know. They're playing some really good football at the moment. I've watched a lot of them recently, and they've been so impressive. And again, if we're not at it straight away, if we don't turn it on in the first half, it would not surprise me at all to see us go 1 or 2 down at half time. If you push me for prediction, I'll be more on the pessimistic side, and I'll say I think we might get a point. I genuinely think we might get a point, lose to City, and draw with Fulham. Look, I'd like to be more optimistic. I wish I could be. I usually am, but it's just the way that I sense that the players at the club are at the moment, where I just don't feel like there's a game plan. I don't feel like everyone's putting their weight for Conte. I don't feel like he's putting his weight, and it could get very messy very soon.
Just on team selection, Alex, particularly for these next couple of games, Man City and Fulham. Heung-min Son, I'm a huge fan of Heung-min Son, my favourite player at Spurs, but of course his form hasn't been that great this season, to say the least. And Hugo Lloris has been at fault for 4 goals so far this season. Do you think there's any chance of Antonio Conte possibly replacing Hugo Lloris for Forster against Man City, or Heung-min Son coming out and Richarlison coming in?
I mean, maybe. The problem is I don't think Forster's a huge improvement on Lloris either. I think from what we've seen from him so far, he's got his own faults. And to be fair to Lloris, whenever he's made big mistakes in the past, he does bounce back. I know that's not excusing the errors he does make, because he's cost us on too many occasions recently. But it wouldn't, on the other hand, it wouldn't surprise me if he just came back against City and played a blinder, because that's the sort of goalkeeper he is. Richarlison, I'm not sure how fit he is, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if this is the kind of game you want to throw him into. And what is the other option for Son? He has been awful this season. Maybe he can regain a bit of hope against City, because again, he's got a very good record against City. Maybe there's part of him that thinks, right, this is the game where I'm really going to turn it on and get back to my best. And yeah, we know Conte doesn't like to change things up much. So I'd be surprised if either of those changes happen. But I wouldn't blame fans or anyone for wanting those changes. Hopefully Bentancur's back. I think that'd be massive for us. Obviously, he's brilliant, and he could make a big difference. So I think that would be the big team news we'd all want.
Alex, very last questions for you. How many signings do you think Spurs will get in the next couple of weeks in the January window? And where do you think Spurs will finish in the league at the end of the season?
I think we're going to get one signing. I think it's going to be Porro, and that might be it. And I think we're going to finish... I'll go for sixth. Sixth, and a very disappointing season overall.
Europa League then. Alex, thanks so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to you again. Tell everyone where they can find you and what you're up to at the moment, and what they can expect from you in the next couple of weeks.
So as mentioned, I'm a content editor at Express. We've obviously got plenty of transfer news coming up for you. It's going to be a hectic few weeks. So please do join us on the Express's online coverage. And also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's alex.milne_92. And yeah, fingers crossed I can bring some good Spurs signings, but can't promise anything.
Yeah, fingers crossed that Alex will be writing away and getting lots of news published about all of our signings, and Antonio Conte perhaps staying next season. Who knows? Or even Pochettino, Thomas Tuchel. Who knows what's going to happen in the next few months, certainly. Alex, thanks so much. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening. And until the next time, come on, you Spurs.